Hello everyone, welcome back to our second session of the online fundraising webcon, which is now going to be empathy mapping to build your digital tribe with Gavin Coopy today. I'd like to start by again thanking Gavin for switching up his session time at the last minute today due to fees unavailability and for adapting his session a little bit today to incorporate some stats around where your online audience reside and what their behaviours are. And that's taken from Fee's presentation today as well. Now, a quick reminder and a bit of housekeeping for some of those who might be just joining us for the first time today. All lines are muted, so if you have any tech issues, please type them into the questions box, which is in your GoToWebinar control panel, and I'll be able to assist you. And also, if you have any questions throughout the session today, please type them into the questions box. We'd love to make this session as dynamic and interactive as possible. And you might have questions come up as Gavin presents today, and we'll take some natural breaks throughout the session to ask those too, as well as have a bit of a Q&A at the end of the session today. Now, if you're on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, that may affect your quality of audio and video in your webinar today. So if possible, close all of those down, as well as any other internet tabs that you have open. And that will ensure you have the best experience today possible. And a reminder that this session is being recorded, and a link to the video and the slides will be emailed to you by the end of the week as well. Now today, Gavin's going to share some really valuable tips on how to find and turn your one-off donors into long-term supporters and really build a journey and an experience with them with your organisation. Gavin's an experienced consultant and social researcher who has helped many charity boards and leadership teams develop strategic approaches to fundraising communications and consumer-led culture change. I really hope you enjoy Gavin's session today. I'll hand over to him to share with you his tips for empathy mapping to build a digital tribe. Thanks, Gavin.
Thanks, Chloe. Thanks for that very much for that introduction, and welcome everybody. Just before I start, I would like to, I find it very important when we're meeting virtually just to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land I'm meeting. You all from Sydney today, and the traditional owners of the land on which I live are the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I would like to acknowledge their leaders, both past, present and emerging, and what we can learn from them of relevance to the work that we do. So thank you very much for coming along today. Hopefully this will be a whistle-stop tour through some useful information. We'll have an opportunity to stop for questions if you pop them in the question area as I go through. I'll have some natural breaks. So anyway, talking about today, really, I think it leads on from the session you had earlier. It's about how do you convert those people who've donated to you to ongoing support, and how do you build a digital relationship with them, and all of the aspects involved in that. As Chloe just said, I'm a consultant and work as part of a strategic collaboration, the More Strategic Group, and there's 6 of us doing various different aspects of the work that we do, and quite a lot today. I will be also relying on Julie Roberts, who's based in the UK, who's a brilliant event and particularly community fundraising guru, and Karen Armstrong, who's an expert in experiences as well. And you might know them, or you might know Martin Paul, who with myself founded More Strategic 12 years ago, or you may have met Ruth Wicks or George King. It's a really powerful team, and I'm lucky to be able to use all their input today. So what are we going to cover today? Really going to start by looking at what, donor love. This is what it's all about, the why of engagement and loyalty, and what drives engagement and loyalty. I've also added in a section slightly longer than I was going to, which is about who, what and where of digital donors, and a big thank you there to Fee McPhee, who couldn't be here today, unfortunately. I was going to reference some of her stuff anyway when I presented later on, but now I've moved here in her place because unfortunately she couldn't be here. I've actually absorbed quite a bit, so I've changed around some of the structure of what I'm going to do, but it really will benefit from that background to the digital world. And then I want to talk about tribes, how to build them, and empathizing with your audience. How do we understand their world? How do we understand them? How do we engage with them better? And then the journey mapping process that we use to identify the moments that matter when you're relating to your donors. And then a few case studies, which I'll refer to along the way anyway, bringing it all together. So what's it all about? It's about sharing the love. People love giving, and there's lots of research from around the world, if you want to look it up, about why donors are happier people. And actually, it's about the fact that engaging with charities and doing something good makes people feel more positive, makes them happier. There's lots of research around that. It generates oxytocin and serotonin, an emotional response to a connection, and is very important at this time. I refer to the work of the great Jen Shang, also with Aidan Sargent from the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy in the UK. And she was talking recently about the importance of looking after our donors in COVID. Why is that important? Because it's all about well-being, and well-being involves three essential characteristics, as she says here, one of which is autonomy and a sense of control, which if you live in Australia is why people bought toilet roll early in the piece, because basically they wanted to get some control, some autonomy over something they could get their hands on and do as a proactive action. They also want connectedness, the quantity and the quality of the relationships they have, and they want to feel competent. They want to feel effective, that they're achieving something. So in effect, if we're offering people a sense of control by helping them engage with us and do some good, we're proving the competency of what they're doing by showing them the impact that they're having on donors, and we are making them feel part of a community. We are giving them well-being, actually giving donor love. And there's loads of research about this. So that's a very important point to make. There's lots of evidence and background around why donating is important to people and why we should be protecting our base of supporters, particularly at this time. And our own research and that of others has shown that it's 5 times more expensive to acquire a new donor than it is to retain an existing one. So actually retaining donors, exactly like retaining customers in any business, is the most important game in town. So how do we do that? Is to understand them and understand what it is about them, us they love. It's 3 times, sorry, not 5 or 7, it's 3 times more expensive. So going to fees work and a bit of background, basically when fee dropped out, it meant that I had a bit of a hole in the sense that I wanted to build on what Fee was giving you today. Fee is a hugely experienced fundraiser and strategic fundraiser. I work with her quite a lot. She and I used to work together at Pareto, which is now IVE, and she uses the IVE benchmarking a lot to inform her work and the work of her clients. And it's a very useful piece of work. The IVE benchmarking looks at data for the top 100 fundraising organisations across both Australia and New Zealand, and combines that information and basically uses billions of dollars of donations and looks at the supporters behind that to build a benchmarking which has been running now for probably 15 years. So they've built a wealth of data. And really it's a useful insight, and particularly if we're wanting to look at who is doing what online and what is that worth. So this is always one of the most interesting charts, which shows types of giving by age. So as you can see, child sponsorship there is actually quite an early giving product. Between 30 to 40 is at the peak. Events also amongst people who are 20 to 50, more likely to be happening out there. Tails off in the 60s and 70s. But what does come in later life and is the model that older people like to use is single gift. So cash gifts is what drives relationships with older people. But regular gifts is what drives engagement with younger people. So, you know, we have that dichotomy there between the two. Online, we are increasing the number of single gifts though, and using that as a new way of engaging people with regular gifts as a second step. And if we look at the income year on year from the benchmarking study, we can see that you know, giving through digital channels has more than trebled in the last 7 years. So the growth is quite impressive during that time. And what do we mean by digital? What is that made up of? So here you can see that the split basically is between child sponsorship, 18%, events, 19%, regular gifts at nearly a quarter, and single gifts at 40%. So quite a lot of single gift giving is online, and a lot of that may be even significant major gifts. But a lot of that is also two-step, as I said, what we call two-step, engaging with one gift to then get on to regular giving. Moving on, what does that actually mean in the channels that people are using? And here is a very important piece of information. So if we're actually talking about income, real donations, then 37% is coming from email and in response to email, 62% is coming through the web, and only 1% is coming from social and SMS together. So very much social is still not driving online giving. So online and digital, we often use those two terms interchangeably, but as you can see there, the vast majority is still coming from either email or from web giving. And what age group are we talking about? Well, as you can see from this, baby boomers, 56 to 76, in other words, 56-year-olds, 76-year-olds are almost the same in the volume that they're giving as Gen X and Gen Y combined. So it's not all necessarily about younger people. Interestingly, slightly more from your Gen Y, who are 26 to 40. But basically, you're also still getting over 1 million of that income from builders, which is the next age group up from baby boomers. So that is people 76 plus. So it's not a young audience. No donation audience is a young audience. So the majority are still over 40. The vast majority are still over 40. And what do we know about what's happening on the websites? People are going to our sites more. They're doing so more on mobile than ever before, as you can see on the left-hand chart. So mobile is showing an increase over and above desktop, and tablet still quite low. But the same patterns of giving are happening online as are happening in other mechanisms. So basically, it's still about tax and Christmas peaks. Depending on where you are in Australia, obviously the vast majority of donations come in May and June, and in fact May is a greater month than almost all the others, including December. So May and June is when the majority comes in. A large part of the rest of it comes in December. So depending on your cause, it's still about the same rhythms as general appeals. So what are we finding out about how long people are spending? So visitors are spending less than 2 minutes on our sites. And as you can see, the amount of time they're spending on the left-hand side, so this is the average session duration, is greater on desktop by a significant margin, from tablet, from mobile. And so basically size of screen and type of interaction means that desktop is still the most engaged. So what we see on the right-hand side, which is splitting the day by time, shows you that, and I've sort of slightly highlighted that middle piece. So literally 9 to 5 is when more of the donations are coming in. And the days when they're coming in most is middle of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So Saturdays and Sundays much quieter, and if anything, it comes in the evenings. Fridays and Mondays are quieter as well. People have other priorities. So the best days are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And you can see from those peaks, after lunch, probably the key moment when people are on. So it's after lunch on the desktop. And what we know also, and very important to bear in mind, is that younger donors attrite quicker. So they're more vulnerable to the declines that happen within attrition, that we all know happens within donors. We often talk about a 6-week rule. If you haven't reactivated a donor within 6 weeks, they're like a new donor that you've acquired. If you don't activate them within 6 weeks, then they're likely to be just as cold as when they first gave. So bear that in mind. We need to reactivate people as soon as possible. But again, younger donors attrite quicker. So online behaviours, what can we say? So these are these slides from what she knows from the IVE data. Whilst mobile has more activity, giving is done on desktops at a higher rate. Visitors are spending less than 2 minutes on our website, so we've really got to make them work as hard as possible and as simply as possible. They do this during the week, in the middle of the day. The younger the visitor, the longer they spend on the site, but the older the visitor, the more likely they are to give. People give more via desktop, giving whilst they're at work. So that 2:30 giving peak is what you want to be targeting. Online givers are therefore women and men, but more women as ever. We find on most databases and in most engagement, women more likely to engage. Older, think Gen X and above, so 40 plus, even 50 plus. The younger are more likely to be peer-to-peer and campaigners than older donors. So yes, you can engage people through peer-to-peer and campaigning as younger audiences, but if you really want money, then it's the same old audience of over 40s. Where the digital giving audiences are, Facebook and social is good for lead generation and conversations. So remember, the audience is in control here, not your organization. It's a conversation they are having. It's things they want to promote. So you can set up to receive donations on Facebook, but remember, it's about audience and motivations to give. Are they there to give? Overall revenue contribution is low, but it can be a great lead generator, and a relationship is unlikely to be sustained through Facebook alone. So going back to that point, social is good for lead generation and conversations. It's good for engaging people initially. It's not necessarily your route to short-term or money or long-term relationships. So you should look at your social, if you have a good social coverage, and ask yourself, do I already have an audience there? Why are they there? What is it they want from me? And are they a potential giving or a lead audience? And if the answer to any of those is no, then it becomes a distraction. So don't allow yourself to be distracted by social media. I go back to the point, less than 1% of money is actually coming in through social media for the top 100 charities in Australia at the moment. There is the odd example of organisations that use it very well. They're more likely to be events-based, and they're more likely to be niche. So SMS and mobile, we're seeing some growth in. It can be, SMS in particular can be effective for engagement and opening up the conversation. And it drives some response, but from an engaged audience. So it's better to use with existing donors than it is with new. And we're looking at a lot of AI, artificial intelligence driven communications around using SMS to coach people or gain input from them and interact generally. You can also use Messenger and WhatsApp groups, which can help create community and engagement, but you have to be careful around privacy within those. Core though, it's about your website and it's about email. An email can drive donations if you have people's email addresses, you have the permission to email them, and people open your emails and they are relevant to them. And once they've seen that the message is relevant and want to go somewhere, your website and donation environment is good. So very important that these things go together. And we would say, and I'll show you how, people opening your emails and finding them relevant and interesting is the most important factor there. Furthermore, emails can help with engagement, help with retention and stewardship, development of donors, if the same things are true. So if you have their email addresses, if you have their approval, and if what you send them is interesting and engaging enough, at the same time as having a website that supports that, and don't go back to the point, people are spending 2 minutes on your website, make it work as quickly as possible. So that's a review of where Fee was going to leave us. And in reality, it leads into the next point with talking about engagement. So this is all about engagement. So how do we engage people with our cause and engage people with understanding who they are? And how can we measure it? Very simply. So simply put, we would say that using a net endorser score is a good way of measuring engagement. And short of any other, we haven't found a better way. But the question is important. We always ask the question, and I'm hoping everybody knows what a net endorser score is. You basically ask people to answer a question 0 to 10, and the way we ask the question is very important. If a friend was looking to make a donation to an organization and asked your advice, how likely would you be to recommend X organization? The reason we ask it that way is because people don't go around shouting about who they donate to. But if they were asked by somebody else, then they would offer their advice. What you do is you take your promoters who scored 9 and 10, and you take away your detractors who scored under 6, and you have your net endorser score. So if we look at the relative net endorser score for organizations we've worked with and put it in their surveys, we can see there's a variance on the level, but basically if you're averaging 43% or above, so if you take away your promoters from your detractors and have a score of 43 plus, then you're doing well by the standards of other charities. You can see a couple there, 58, 56, 78 is an outlier. They're an organization that does an amazing job of engaging their supporters. 15%, 19% are campaigning organizations that also have a lot of campaigners. And because we asked the question about making a donation, they're less likely to advise making a donation because they don't actually do it themselves. So we have to be careful about that. But the average is 43. And through all of our survey work, and we do a lot of survey work, we've surveyed something like 170,000 donors. We've done about 20 different public studies over the last 10 years. And so we have a wealth of knowledge about what drives this engagement score. And the factors that we've found most important within the questions that we ask is these 4 out of a set of about 10. So one is they're the most important cause I support. No, that's not charity, that's cause. So your cause is the one that connects with them. I'm very satisfied with how they treat me. This is about experience. Importantly, what they send me is enjoyable or interesting to read. So I am engaging with the emails that they send me. And there's also a higher level of engagement with those who would say I make decisions with my heart rather than my head. So they're saying they're more emotional than rational. We also know that offering people choice in communications is important, and giving them the chance to interact with you and share their opinion also drives a higher net endorser score. So we've used this in many different ways, but basically simple form surveys with 3 or 4 questions can gather you a whole lot of information about how people relate to you. So what we've done over the years is an extensive piece of work with different 6 or 7 leading charities, looking at their face-to-face recruits on the street and trying to work out who is going to be more engaged over time and therefore who's going to attract less. So what we've done is we've run short form surveys based on an email that followed up from a recruitment. And what we've done is we basically asked 4 simple questions, one of which was around how much you would want to support that cause. So what's your level of commitment? The second is why is that? Leave them verbatim to say, I support them because of X, Y, or Z. We then asked them about what they think their level of commitment was, in the sense of, how long do you think you'll support them for? And the 4th question is then around what was the experience on the street? So we measure up how committed they were to the cause anyway with their experience on the street. Satisfaction across the bottom is about the experience on the street, and commitment on the left is about how connected they were with the cause. So there'll be some people who are connected to the cause they were ready to give and then had a really bad experience on the street, so they're disappointed. There's those that, I wasn't really that bothered about the cause, but I thought I'd give to it anyway and didn't have a good experience on the street, they're doubtful. Whereas the champions are the people who are committed and had a great experience on the street, and the charmed are the people who probably, really enjoyed the conversation, but weren't necessarily that engaged. And as you can see immediately, by splitting them like this, we can have different communications based on where they are. So obviously, if they're a detractor and a low commitment, then really you want to be persuading them. They're the doubtful, and you want to persuade them. What can we tell them about our work which will demonstrate the impact? Those that had a low commitment similarly, but the champions, it's about making them feel good about the work. It's great you've signed up. Here's some stories immediately about how successful we've been. What have we learned about the impact of these approaches based on that simple 4-question survey? So first thing to say is answering the survey shows higher quality. So basically those people who responded to the survey attract less after 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months. So basically we know this from so many other surveys. If you do nothing else, when you do a survey, you just make a note of who's replied to the survey on your database, you can say they're more engaged. But the segments are highly predictive. So we can see that the champions are, you're right, Chloe? Sorry. The champions are more engaged right across, even within the year, they're more engaged by a significant margin, so 39% versus 27. So we can see that identifying people in this way through simple short form surveys actually has an impact on their retention over time. So there we've talked about basically sort of simple survey information that you can gather to measure how engaged you are. This now is talking about the work of Julie Roberts and her expertise in events. And she's done a lot of work around building your community. So when you remove community fundraising from the real world and take it online, what engages people in that new environment with doing fundraising on your behalf? So this is really about community events and building a tribe of digital community event participants. What Julie's work has shown is that there are different motivations around the people that you want to engage with your tribe. So you have three types broadly. The doer, they raise funds, they support through knowledge sharing, they're existing members and newbies who are excited. So they're the people who really make it happen. They're the fundraising leaders. You've then got a group of thinkers who quite enjoy interactive, having new ideas and giving creative input. And they'll contribute new ideas to other people. So they might talk to doers and say, hey, maybe if you try this, you can raise even more money. And then there are talkers, the influencers who like to share and interact. They want to comment, they want to share, they want to identify the people they think are doing a good job and demonstrate that to other people. So what you're doing by getting your doers to showcase what they're doing, so basically getting them first to show what they're doing, getting them to interact with the thinkers, and they think about the fundraising ideas that build from what the other person is already doing. Then you get talkers who are actively talking about fundraising ideas they've seen that they think are brilliant and identifying and highlighting those doers. And therefore, as an end result, you get more doers holding more fundraisers. So it's a virtuous driver of the number of people taking part in your events. And this is particularly where it's about being creative, where you're giving people themes and you're getting them to interact with engaging with what that theme means to them. And at the end, I'll come on to an example, but this Julie's used extensively, and particularly recently for the 24 campaign that they ran for Pancreatic Cancer UK. So this is all about your do your thing community. So doers interacting with each other, thinkers providing ideas and inspiring, and your talkers promoting ideas and building energy and engaging more people into it, meaning that you get newbie donors through the people talking, driven by new ideas from the people thinking, and the whole thing has a virtuous synergy to it, and you create your tribe by doing this. So that's a little bit of a background about how to build your tribe and how to see your tribal members as different and their role in the equation as different. So I thought I'd quickly stop just there in case, Chloe, there are any questions that have come up.
Yeah, I've just got a question from Andrew. You mentioned a lot around this sort of surveying your community or doing these surveys. Would you recommend that surveys are done by an external organisation, or it could be done internally and sent out to all donors? You know, is there a difference in the way these surveys are done?
Brilliant question, and actually leads on to my next slide. Quite nicely, so I might just move on and talk about
Convenient.
it there, if
There you
that's
go.
okay.
Great.
There you go. Perfect.
Sure.
Thank you, Andrew. So what can we find out about the people who support us? So here's someone who actually, this is a project that I was doing actually with White Ribbon around domestic violence and engaging men with domestic violence. So here's a classic supporter of that organization that we wanted to find out more about. So what can we learn? Firstly, data analytics. So what's their recency, frequency, value? And how does that build a picture of how they engage? I'll go to the fourth point first, since your question, Andrew, is there. I think that anybody can run a mini survey, and you almost don't have to have external support to do it. I've given you the tools already, even though you may not have noticed them. But run a quick survey which has your net endorser score. How likely would you be to recommend somebody else to donate to us? And then I would follow it up with how committed was the person to the cause. Leave it open verbatim, saying why did you commit to the cause, and what would you like to hear more about? So those 4 questions, I would deliver them in the thank you. So when somebody donates to you on your website, send them a quick email saying, look, quick 4 questions that we'd like to ask you. That's the simplest type of mini survey that you can do. Short form, you can use SurveyMonkey for that. You can even use Google Docs. It's not terribly secure, but SurveyMonkey is useful for that. There are various different programs. If you want to run a proper donor survey on a much bigger level, then obviously use somebody external. We do a lot of survey work for a lot of organizations, and it ranges from everything from 5 or 6 quick questions up to a full-blown donor survey. So I'm just about to report on 2 that I've done in the last 8 months or so, where we looked at quite a lot of different measures of engagement, etc. But if you really want to get some quick and not dirty information already, then try a mini survey. It's 3 or 4 questions. Why did they engage? What is it about your organization they like? How likely would they be to recommend you? What would they like to hear about? So, but also there's demographics. What can we find out about demographics? And a lot of that we can find from lookalike data from social, if they're on social and Facebook. If they're on Facebook and they're talking, observe and listen in. Listen into what they're saying, what they're doing. And talk to them, or people you know like them. I'll come on to what I mean by that. But talk to them. I mean, ring some donors. Ask them why they support you. Ask what it is that is particularly important to them. This has been a particularly good time to do this during COVID, because really it's a great opportunity to go and prove that they are part of a community. Going back to Jen Sheng's comment at the beginning about, that connection, prove that they're part of a community, that you value their giving, and you really just want to find out a little bit more about what it is. Make it clear it's not a sales conversation, but it's more about exploring why they support you and what it is about you that they enjoy. So there's lots of different ways that you can do this informally. You don't necessarily need to use an external supplier. Even though I am one, I spend my life doing this, I would say there's still a lot, if you're a very small organization with very limited resources, that you can do yourself. So what do I mean about talking to them and understanding them? So this is the core of what we do, is a lot of empathy mapping. So you may have seen this before, but this is a classic empathy map. Just literally look them up online. There's quite a few different versions out there. Find the one that you like. And it's really about immersing ourselves in the life of this person. So if we know all of this kind of stuff, let's try and understand them to another level. Let's try and say, what are they doing every day? Let's try and walk in their shoes for a day and see what it is important to them. So the way we work through this diagram is actually not quite like this. So what we do, if we're talking about Daryl, is we observe and then we infer. What do I mean by that? Okay, so we look at what does Daryl hear and see around him. So Daryl hears people in the office talking about fundraising for various different organizations. He sees people doing peer-to-peer fundraising activities, but also there's a whole lot of other stuff going on in his life. So what does he say when he sees people doing those kind of things? And what does he do himself? Does he do some fundraising activity? Does he donate to his friends? Why does he donate to his friends? What is it about all of that that makes it important to him? And then we infer. So what is he thinking? What is actually going on inside his head? What sort of ideas are coming up when he looks at what other people? I think I could do that, but I think I want to do it for an organization I really want to support. And what is he feeling? I'd be much happier if I could help that charity that I feel quite passionate about. They've given me some good information. I really, how's he feeling about that? He's feeling encouraged, and he's also feeling positive about doing something and actually getting fit at the same time. So what are the pains and what are the gains? Now, this is really where you get into inferring. What is it that he is not able to achieve, and what are the gains that he could achieve? And the pains in his life at the moment are that he's concerned about his sister's boyfriend. She's a very close friend of his. He seems to be a bit putting pressure on her. He is concerned that this is not necessarily appropriate. He doesn't know how to approach this topic with his sister. What's the right way to do it? So what he really needs is some information and some support, some help that will help him take some action that will make him feel better about his sister's situation and feel that he's done something. So the insights from all of that and our understanding are around, we really need to give him some information that helps him feel better, and then we can build a relationship with him where he actually then sees that information of such value that he's going to be paying us back for that at some point. So what we came out with was actually this picture of Daryl. He's a young socialite. His age is 24. It's his first job in an office. He flat shares and his sister lives nearby. He lives in Newtown. He likes the gym, sports viewing with mates, and going out. He's looking to make a name at work and enjoys socializing, so he's going to take part in events. We'll support a charity through peer-to-peer, and he's worried about his sister. As I said, he isn't convinced about the way her new partner treats her. The other day, she explained away some bruising in an odd way, which supports his suspicion. He doesn't know what to do about it. So Daryl's left feeling, I really need some help with this. So that was the core persona that we created around using exactly this technique to look at what was a day in his life, what were the things that were concerning him, what's his pains and gains. That's the real outcome. The pains are about his sister. The gain would be if he could find some information that would help him. So this is an exercise you can go through based on having gathered all that information there and also talking to people. And what I say is, when we've also got this, then actually start. If you're not in Daryl's group, if you're not a Daryl, find some Daryls to talk to, even if they're not donors or supporters of your organization. In this instance, how many people do you know who've got a son in the office, who've got a son who's 24? Can you talk to them? You know, do you have a social group where you can talk to people like Daryl? Find out what their lives are really like. Test that you're not just making a whole load of assumptions about them. And if you go to the next level of sophistication, you can actually use complex surveys and develop a proper segmentation that actually then gives you personas that you can use for full-on communication strategies. So this is a project that we ran with St. John in New Zealand. We created a 8-segment sort of model of their supporters, and we had different channels and different ways of communicating for each. And we knew which were worth more, which were worth less, which to focus on. And basically from that survey, we also found that the short form number of questions that you would need to identify people into these segments so that you could communicate with them differently. So this is at the top end of sophistication, but it helps you if you can define your Daryls, if you can find out more about who they are, what they do, why they engage with you, and therefore match up more with their expectations to engage them better. So what do we do then? What we do then is take that information and we go through a process that looks at the journey that we take them on. Where are we at the moment, and what sort of journey do we take them on? How do we build a better journey that excites them and engages them better? And what I'd like to do is very quickly go through a little story that explains how we do journey mapping based on the insights that came from Oracle Marketing Cloud and all the work that was done years ago to define a very simple journey mapping process. Some of you may have seen some of this, but hopefully this then builds from, we've got our persona, here's Daryl, let's talk about where he might go, and let's use the example of a historical example that created a whole journey mapping model, which we've now adapted for use in not-for-profits. Started with this General Electric machine, which is an MRI, and those of you that have been in an MRI will know in the hospital when you've had a check that it is an incredibly overwhelming, loud experience. This is Doug Dietz. He's the GE engineer who created this and the latest version of it. Was very proud of it. He made the mistake of going to watch it in use in a hospital. In that hospital at that time was a young girl called Sophia. She was one of a significant percentage of people who go through an MRI. Unfortunately, she was aged 6.5, and this was a very threatening experience for her. And she really did not enjoy the experience. And in fact, so much so that she ended up having to be sedated to be put through the machine. So it turned out when Doug asked around that actually 84% of children Sophia's age had to be sedated to go through an MRI machine. What could he do to improve this? Because all the brilliance of his machine was wasted if this was the story with 83. So what they did is they decided to journey map the experience. And these are the fundamental levels they looked at. So basically, they looked at Sophia's journey, and they looked at who she was interacting with. So what's happening on stage? What is she seeing? Which people is she interacting with? What things is she doing? And backstage, who are the people and the things that made that happen? So you can journey map on all these levels. The most important thing was her behaviors and her attitudes. So when you look at that, this is a broad model of what that map looked like. So when she came into the hospital and the onstage experience, she had the check-in nurse, the imaging tech, her mum was obviously there, and a nurse, the MRI machine she saw, she had a chart, and there was a desk and computer. And backstage, obviously there's a lot of things that make that happen. System admin, patient record systems, Doug as the person responsible for the machine, patient safety team. Now, importantly, we start to look at her behaviors. So she's checked in, she walks into the room, she sees the machine, she cries and resists. The doctor enters, she gets drugged, she goes through the MRI. That's the simple behavior line. Most importantly, she's feeling nervous, looks scary. Will it hurt me? Mum can't help. No, please don't do that. She has to get drugged. So really the most important piece of all of this is the top level, the attitudes. And what we do then is we say which of those are negative or positive, and which of them is the most important moment to change. So it's actually that moment where she cries and resists and realizes this is going to be a horrible experience, and there's no going back from that point there. So how do they make life better for her in this environment? The impact of that then, if we map the impact, is loss of imaging time, more staff needed, the cost of the drugs, and the side effects of the drugs for poor Sophia, who then takes some time to come around afterwards, has to be kept in the hospital with her mum, etc., etc., etc. So we can see that this is a massive impact when we think about the way the hospital operates. So they did some exploration really to help try and understand how to meet that need to feel safe. So how do they make her feel safe at that point there? So what they went to talk to a lot of kids like Sophia, and they said, okay, what makes you feel safe is kind of fun and safe at the same time. So it's a fun experience, it's something you like doing, but you feel fairly safe. You're still pretty safe in that experience, but you're able to enjoy it hugely. And they came out with camping. So camping was the theme really that connected with an experience which was both safe and enjoyable at the same time. So let's go. Camping was the idea. The outcome, hopefully, is feeling safe. So they designed a whole new experience around this. And this is what they came up with in the physical manifestation of the MRI. You can almost not see the MRI machine in here because it's made to look like a camp with a little campfire in the background and a caravan and exciting colors, nice setting in the forest with a bit of nice greenery and flowers. Very, very different from the environment that was there beforehand. So we've made it into a completely different experience, which is the objective here. Not only that, we build in the experience beforehand. So she arrives, she sees the doctor the first time, and they says, well, I've got to go on a camping expedition. So here's a backpack to go on the camping expedition. She then goes to see the nurse when she checks in. The nurse is really friendly, and she talks about the camp guide. This is what's going to happen on camp. And then she actually enters the campsite. So we save on imaging time, fewer staff, no drugs, side effects, and it's not that bad at all. She puts up with the MRI scan. So once they did all this, they changed that figure from over 80% of Sophia's peers needing drugs to get through the experience to 7%. So radically different by changing the experience, not just in the moment, but also prior to that. So our objective is to identify the moments that really matter. And it's really looking at those attitudes and behaviors, as I said. But we add in the real feels. It's anxious, scared, terrified, and that's the moment that matters because she cries and resists. You can do this whole process without necessarily looking at the on-stage and the backstage support. So don't necessarily need to be looking at who they're engaging with or who's doing what in the back, unless you're actually planning your systems around this. So if you're planning your CRM, you need to be looking at who's in your backstage support that needs to be building what into your CRM system to create this experience that you want to have. But we largely now spend our time on the behaviors and upwards rather than the behaviors downwards, if you like, on this diagram. And we spend a lot of time around the emotional needs of people. So this is actually a quick picture of the White Ribbon team in action. That's their post-it noted journey of the actions through to the attitudes and behaviors. You can see they've got some moments that matter there. So when we look at Daryl, we found that, you know, his low point was not sure about the boyfriend. We identified that. At the high point was having been helped then by White Ribbon with information. He then felt, oh great, I've got some really good information out of the organization, I might fundraise for them. Then when he fundraised, they didn't follow up properly. So that moment there really was where they let him down. So we identified those two moments as core moments in his journey. But the boom, the real opportunity was to transform his experience once he actually had fundraised for them. So that's a brief whistle-stop tour through journey mapping as we use it. And so just before I move on, I was just going to say, Chloe, do we have any other questions at this moment in time?
No questions at this time. Thank you, Gavin.
Okay. So what does this mean in actual projects? So one example from Karen Armstrong in our team, Salvation Army, the objective was to look at their door knockers and to improve the completion rate from registration to collection, to increase the average amount collected, increase the retention rate, and identify VIPs. All of online engagement, it is most important to be looking at your VIPs. So the people who are likely to come back, the people who are likely to do more, both as donors and particularly in events. So as part of this process, there was an extensive mapping program with the Salvation Army. We looked at door knock donors, volunteers, and we also looked at the experience of people who were running these programs. So what could we learn that would help us improve? What was it that they needed from the organization? Here's a simple map of their persona. So Donna was their volunteer persona, age 56. She's a business owner and she's on social media. She's divorced and the kids have left home, so she's got time on her hands. She is doing online courses, lives in Roseville in Sydney, quite connected with a local church, spends a lot of time on Facebook, but still uses the old snail mail, likes the odd cup of tea and coffee with friends. So we started out with all of this, and this was also based on data from their database. So they knew they'd narrowed down what these people looked like. We wanted to get inside their heads. So that's what we did with all the journey mapping that we did on their behalf. What we identified there for a new person like Donna was that she'd signed up for the door knock, but she'd never done it before. So maybe I just don't want to do it. and I don't really know enough about it. So the rational need at that moment was, I now know where to go, what to say, and how much to raise. So could we help her know where to go, what to say, and how much to raise? And then she would be all right, ready, and let's get on with it. So we needed to give her that information to move her from that moment where she'd signed up, wasn't quite sure what was going to be involved, and therefore needed to have support and greater confidence that she knew now what to do. So first thing that we did was email out a survey or SMS out a survey with new volunteers and returning volunteers, and we did a simple 4-question commitment and confidence matrix, which was about, okay, how confident are you that you know the parameters of what you need to do, how much time you need to do, how many houses you're likely to do, have you got somebody else to do it with, have you done it before? So simply putting people on a level of confidence. And from that, we then took them on a journey, which was around really coaching them, personalizing the message, but very much spending time with them, working out what time they had, what was the best channel to support them with online, and what was their confidence level, and how could we help them build that level. So basically we took them through a coaching program that sort of gave them tips, hints, and I'll come on to a bit more detail about what we did, but basically therefore gave them the confidence to get over that moment that mattered and get into actually door knocking. And once they'd banked, we thanked, evaluated their ability to be a VIP for the future and their likelihood to retain and extend in future years. And anybody who didn't bank, we actually went back and asked them why. And all of this, because of the way that we were doing it through Qualtrics, which is the system that we use, was able to be reported on a dashboard to the client, so they could see how many people were doing what at any one time in the coaching program. So the impact of asking, I go back to this point. So the baseline, we obviously had a control group that didn't get any of this. We had a group then that had actually seen the survey, but not necessarily completed it. And we had a group that actually responded to the survey. And the impact for participation was an increase of 5% for the survey being sent and 13% for actually people who engaged with the survey and follow up. So you can see quite an impact of engaging them in that, but even an impact in just surveying them and showing an interest in them and what their level of confidence was. So those that filled in the confidence level increased their likelihood to take part by nearly 6%. If they then took the survey and the coaching, increased by 13%. So what does that mean in the process that we actually used? So we established, the first bit we did was establish a baseline. So how much time do you think you're going to door knock for? And we asked them to answer that question. And then based on what they said, we then set the norm, as we would say it. So this is nudging behavioral economics, a science of changing people's behavior positively. So as you can see in this statement, it's like on average, each volunteer contributes 2 hours of their time to collect donations for the Salvation Army's door knock. Would you be able to spend a little more time to collect from a few more houses? Yes. So if the person said about an hour and they said yes to that, we've already set an expectation in their mind that they're going to do 2 hours. Thank you for offering to collect from some additional houses. We'll be back in touch to discuss suitable location. Have you decided when you'll do it? And again, we knew that not having decided on a date was an important factor in people not committing. So we've got them publicly, and this is very important, publicly to say, yes, I'll do more, I'll do 2 hours, and I'll do it on this date. And this increased the value by 25% for people who went through this process. So results, thanks to Karen for giving us the results on this. So in 2016, they recruited 20,000 volunteers, and 42% of volunteers completed their door knocking and banking funds. But the retention rate of volunteers was less than 10% from the previous year. So quite a small number of people coming back. I haven't got the data here, but we've improved that dramatically over time. So in 2017, we reduced the volume of recruited volunteers to 14,000. We increased the net return, though, by 5%. The average raised by 15%, comparing the control to the journey. We improved completion rates, i.e. banking, by 14% to 56% completion. Increased overall average raised by 21%. Increased the average raised by those we'd nudged by 25% with that ongoing coaching, and over 50% engaged in the dialogue. So overall, there was an ROI of 7 to 1 for the coaching journey. So you can see how a simple journey based on a simple survey, which then allows us to coach people, transformed the results for the door knock, and particularly for new participants, new volunteers recruited to take part in the door knock that year. And as I say, we have also then gone on to help the Salvation Army increase their outcomes on the number of people who've been retained year on year as well. So that hopefully that gives you an idea of how looking at Donna and understanding the journey she goes through, helping create a new journey which actually gave her the support she needed to overcome the moment that mattered, because she was left wanting to be able to do more, actually improved the actual outcome overall significantly. And Julie as well would say for her tribe work with people in community events and fundraising through online, that basically coaching makes the difference. Identifying people with potential early, those doers who are strongest, and helping them as much as possible, then will increase the income from those groups. And Julie's 7 secrets, we've talked about some of these, I haven't covered them all, but 7 secrets to crack your digital tribe. So understand supporters' motivations and needs. We've talked about that a lot. Spend a day in their life. Make sure you understand what it is they need to get out of the relationship and how they want to engage. Enrich your data insights and follow the trends that are already occurring. So going back to that point, identify people with potential, people who did a good job last year and raised a lot of money. Then what are they doing this year? Engaging people differently, depending on where they are in the registration pipeline and what role they want to play. So that goes back to that talkers, thinkers, and doers. So getting more doers by getting thinkers to offer ideas and talkers to talk about it. And don't overwhelm them with options. Now, this is classic. I'll talk a little bit about this one because I think it's very important. When you're offering people options, particularly say in community fundraising, never give them more than 6 or 7 at most ideas. We can't retain more than 6 or 7 ideas at the same time. So it's no surprise that Stephen Covey's 7 golden rules, it's because we don't retain more than 6. There's a famous area of research which is around choice modeling. Started from looking at supermarket shelves in the US in one particular study in the early 2000s, which looked at the same shelf in the same supermarket at different times with a multiplicity of like 16 or 20 different types of jam versus the time when they had 3 types of jam. They sold more jam when they had 3 types of jam because people are paralyzed by choice. Don't believe what we read about choice being everything. Choice being refined for me is what's important, which is why if you go on to the Cancer Council website that Julie created, Do It for Cancer, there's 6 fundamental ideas like, run, have a meal, shave, and always one idea, which is whatever you'd like to do, because your most engaged thinkers and doers are going to want to do their own thing. So inspire your supporters then through stories of other fundraisers. And quite often you can raise a lot of money by just making the most out of one particular story of somebody who's going that extra mile for you anyway. So pick up on the good stories, promote them. Those people will feel really good because you're promoting them. Show you love your tribe, support and praise them publicly for others to see. That's part of that. Pick up on people who are inspirational. And at the core, use personas to build empathy maps. Stop thinking like you and create memorable experiences. So at the end of the day, as I said earlier on, and very briefly, Julie has been doing a lot of work with Pancreatic Cancer UK. And years ago, we created an idea for them because there are 24 people in the UK who die from pancreatic cancer. It's one of the biggest killers for the level of presence. It is one of the least survivable cancers, and there's a lot of action needed to turn that around. But the whole of the fundraising theme was doing something in 24s, going 24 kilometers, doing one thing an hour for 24 hours. So lots of themes around things to do with 24. And just as an example of an outcome of what we're doing with that tribe there and what that looks like, here's a couple of fundraising pages which have become digital tribe pages. So on the left, we've got someone who's doing a 24-day challenge. He's running 3 miles every day for the next 24 days. Has anyone else taken the 24-day challenge? And if so, what are you doing? So there you go, asking his community what they're doing as well. He's showing exactly what he's doing every day to do his 3-mile run. He's mapping his runs through Strava direct onto his fundraising page. And he's actually gathered 978 other fundraisers around that challenge through them sharing his story. And on the right, this lady was focused on by pancreatic cancer. So this has actually been tweeted and put up on Facebook. We've seen some really creative fundraising from our supporters during lockdown. Catherine signed up to do 24 challenge, raised an incredible 1,466 herself. So she raised that money herself, and she set herself a challenge of walking 20,000 steps for 24 days, keeping number 24 at the heart of my challenge. And at the end of that time, she had a lovely event in her back garden. By promoting that, they helped her raise a hell of a lot more than the original 1,466 by actually helping promote that through the website and more people doing the same sort of action. So overall, they had 978 fundraisers doing it virtually during COVID and raised 184,882, which was the figure a couple of months ago. So showing that virtual fundraising can actually drive the creation of a digital tribe, and exploring and demonstrating all of the themes that she talks about on her secrets. So that was pretty much what I aimed to cover today. It's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour, for which I kind of apologize in advance because of absorbing more of Fee's stuff. But I think that Fee's great input really helps us frame the digital community that we're talking about more accurately. So anyway, there you go.
Thank you, Gavin.
Hopefully
That was
there's something in there for everyone.
yeah, that definitely, and I think you provided a wealth of information there from the start of today's session around the type of people that spend time online, and I think that busts a few myths about us thinking it's all the 18 to 25-year-old generation that are engaging online with charities. So I think that's food for thought for people. And also around the journey mapping experience. I encourage people to send through their questions now. We've got a bit of time for questions before we finish up today's session. One question we've had come through from Kate is around, I guess, where to get started with the journey mapping experience. I mean, if they're a small organisation and we've got a variety of different types of donors, how do you how do you start? Where do you pick the right person to start journey mapping for, or the right segment, I guess, to start journey mapping for?
Look, and I think that comes back to part of what Fee would probably have been talking about, which is what's your objective. Just a quick point, sorry, on something you mentioned there about the age. Younger people do engage with charities online, but much more likely to be, supporting somebody else in peer-to-peer or campaigning. Older people give.
Yes.
And I think that's the key point.
Mm.
Sorry, and to the question, and it was from Kate, wasn't it? Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
So look, I think it's about what do you know about your donors at this moment in time, and what's the volume value. So, in any organization, you'll always find that 20% of your donors are giving you 80% of the money. So I would find the 20% who are giving you 80% of the money and start your journey mapping from there. Or maybe they're people that you already know quite a lot about, in which case start on some of those that are not quite so useful at the moment, but might represent 80% of your volume, but they're not giving you the same amount of money. So really, I think it starts from being strategic and saying, which audience do we most need to convert, A, to giving us more money in the first instance, but also to retain. And at this moment, what is our journey like? And being really honest about your journey. So there's lots of data that you can gather from your CRM about who is out there and what they're giving you, and do some just literal volume value, try and identify the kinds of people that are most likely to be giving you the most money, make a decision about what the priorities are within that, and be strategic would be my advice.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, that does. Yeah. I've now got a question here from Claire. She asks quite a relevant question. If they're starting from nothing, i.e., starting a charity or a cause for the first time, is there sort of a pre-fundraising or friend-raising step that they need to do to find out, who their audience is, who are their audience of supporters, and where do they start?
Yeah, good question, Claire. Well, the good question might be to start by working out what your proposition is, I think. So what is it that you do as an organization, and why would people give you their support? What is it that is at the core of what will connect people to the cause and get them to give? Is it an experience they've had? It'd be interesting to know what Claire's sort of topic area is, but in reality, you need to get to the core of what it is about your cause that people will connect with, and that people might give you money for. So really at that core is, and we talk about this being about, who is your beneficiary, what is the outcome, how will we prove progress, and how do we encapsulate that in a message? Who do we think might connect with that? So you need to think through all of that, and maybe it even starts with you, Claire, saying, this is why I do what I do, this is why my board does what they do, and this is the core of what makes that a powerful and engaging story. So write the story of why people should engage with your organization because of the great outcomes you are going to achieve. So my starting point would be that.
Yeah, brilliant. And I guess in terms of assessing the right places to start, I mean, the data that Fee has provided around the online giving behaviours and digital giving behaviours, is that data publicly available, or is it, are there particular places that people can go aside from these kind of sessions to find out more about that data set?
I think the general reporting from the IVE benchmarking is shared. There are other studies that are publicly available online. If you just search through available studies on why people give, as I said, have a look at the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy. There's a group in the UK about loyalty. I might try and put some useful sort of links in the version of the presentation that we share, but I'm pretty sure I can share this presentation as is. So obviously some of that data is in there. I think at this moment it's very broad brush, but really the key things to take away are that, it is about getting your website right. And if you're focusing on one thing, focus on email. If you want to raise awareness, if you want to raise engagement with your cause, then social media and Facebook in particular is good, but you want to drive them to your website. You want to get a contact to email, and those will be the things that will drive a digital community around your brand in the first instance.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. That seems to be all the questions we have for today. So is there anything else you would like to share to help wrap up today's session?
Obviously, I'll leave my contact details as well. Happy to spend a few minutes with people if there are bits they want to explore further with that at another time, and the question comes to them in the next couple of weeks or something, then just feel free to drop me a note. And basically happy to give you my thoughts and helping you, however large your organization is, Claire with your startup or somebody with a bigger challenge. Happy to share how to make today's session as relevant as possible to whatever your challenge is.
Thank you. Thanks, Gavin. I really appreciate it, and appreciate the level of detail you provided in today's session. You provided some really great examples for people too about how to actually apply some of that theory, which can sometimes be a bit tricky. So appreciate that, and that data I think provides a lot of context for the discussion we've been having so far today around the whys of digital fundraising as well. So thank you for that. And thank you everyone for thank you, and thank you everyone else for attending today's session and for joining us. I'll now be closing this session, and you will be taken to a survey regarding it today's session with Gavin that we'd really appreciate you completing, and you'll be able to join our next session, which is on whether the perfect CRM system exists, with Stephen Malley, and that will be at 1 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time, or 3 o'clock for those in New Zealand. So again, thank you all for being with us. We'll see you all again soon, and thank you, Gavin. We'll see you again soon.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.